There has always been environmental issues in the area.
My family, along with many, many others, came to Detroit as a land of promise, a land of dreams, a land of where you could work and earn a living.
The influence of money in politics of corporations in Michigan is more profound than any other state.
Growing up, it was difficult to really grasp how dangerous it was in the area.
Why is environmental justice important?
According to Dr. Robert Bullard, environmental racism refers to any policy, practice, or directive that differentially affects or disadvantages individuals, groups, or communities based on race or color.
I am from the community of Southwest Detroit, 48217, and this area that I come from and live in has been deemed the most polluted zip code in the state of Michigan due to the overabundance of more than, from what I have learned, 42 major and minor source polluting industries.
Environmental justice is critical to life on Earth. It's critical to our families. It's critical to our communities. Every person deserves a warm home and a safe community. Our kids deserve to grow up in a place where they feel like the air that they breathe isn't poisoning them.
There are cumulative and disproportionate impacts from a variety of pollution sources. This means that some communities are burdened by multiple pollution sources more than others. In our region, the areas particularly affected by the co-location of industrial and commercial transportation include Detroit's Delray neighborhood and greater Southwest Detroit, parts of Ecorse and River Rouge, and Southeast Dearborn. Of course, there are other neighborhoods throughout Detroit and nearby experiencing similar threats to environmental health and justice related to industry, legacy contamination, or hazardous waste sites, for instance.
I grew up with the norm of a foul odor in the air. I grew up with the norm of the air being dusty and coughing or sneezing because something has irritated me.
One of the things I realized about 48217 Detroit was that people were not that familiar with the heavy industry that surrounded the Tri-Cities.
Primarily where I reside is the South End of Dearborn. The entire area, the little community that's there, is surrounded by about 42 major and minor source pollutants. DTE, Marathon, AK Steel, which is now Cleveland Cliffs, formerly also Severstal, US Steel, Ford Rouge plant. These are the biggest offenders in our area. I think 3 of them that are the state's biggest transgressors are located in this specific area. My area of focus has always been that community because that's where I grew up, and that's where like all my family and residents and community is suffering from the issue of environmental injustice.
Growing up before the advancements in technology, simple air drying of clothing was not even safe. You would have that sulfuric smell.
There's no green. It's really, there's mounds and heaps of this, particulate matter.
Right on the border of Canada, we were seeing 10, 13, 16,000 semi-trucks every day after the signing of NAFTA.
I grew up born in River Rouge, and every day I saw an orange-colored sky. It either was orange or it was red, every single day. But I didn't realize the impact until I was like in my 40s, and I developed asthma in my 20s, and I didn't understand what was happening with my body.
In addition to these threats, many of these same communities have also experienced exclusion from economic, employment, and educational opportunities for generations. Leaders must recognize that decisions about economic, environmental, and health policies are all related.
The easiest way to describe it is just racism, and it's a racism that's embedded and systemic. It's ingrained in the system. People are redlined into blocks, and then those blocks, they throw all these different companies into those blocks, and eventually you have environmental racism because now these people are being more negatively impacted than others.
Much of this region has been in non-attainment status or not met the Clean Air Act standards for sulfur dioxide for over a decade. And while there have been reductions in recent years, much more work is needed to reduce levels of SO2, as well as levels of ozone, black carbon, particulate matter, heavy metals, and other hazardous pollutants in the air.
When we're out of compliance and we're in non-attainment for air quality standards here, we can be in non-attainment for years. There's no penalty, there's no urgent timeline that anybody has because they're not here breathing the air in this community. There needs to be an accountable process that says, we recognize that these are the pollutants, we've got diesel emissions, we've got particulates in the air, we have sulfur dioxide in the air. What are the plans to get us into attainment in this community? How are we going to make sure that we're not subjecting people for, who knows how long to these pollutants?
Unfortunately, our state standards are very weak. There are many issues and lack of regulations that our state does not have to properly enforce proper environmental emissions. One of which is cumulative impact. So South Dearborn is a highly concentrated industrialized area. And when you have so many contributors to poor emissions, when a new source of emission is to be submitted to the state or the city, they don't take into account the existing environment. So that only adds to the problem that we already are trying to resolve, and that is one of the biggest problems.
Permits to pollute continue to be issued.
Can you imagine, for 40 years, we've been exposed to numerous chemicals without our knowledge? 8 people in one house having cancer and all dying and passing away from it? Now you can understand why we feel that our environment is having a serious impact on our lives.
About 8% of U.S. adults have asthma, whereas about 15 to 16% of adults in Detroit have asthma. The health effects and disparities related to air pollution are well known. Research links it to respiratory, cardiovascular, reproductive, and cognitive issues, as well as cancer and premature death. These lifelong health issues can also affect generations to come.
We had a health survey. So we were circulating the health survey, and if you completed the health survey and you said that either someone died in that home or had cancer, we would ask if they wanted to put a white cross in front of their home. And so that's what happened.
Growing up seeing it, it wasn't something that was weird, but you got like little hints of it from people that were outsiders. Those little instances, they raised red flags for me personally to see that, hey, something's wrong. People don't normally live like this.
We know the detrimental impacts that burning coal has on human lives. We know this. And they're gonna close anyway, because really the powers to be know that we need to move from burning coal to cleaner energy. It's just a matter of how long will we carry these old, ancient practices on.
I think environmental justice in Michigan and in Detroit in particular is about power. Who has it, who doesn't? Who has the resources to fight back? Who has the social capital and political capital to go to hearings, to make the case, to be taken seriously when that case is made? Those are political questions. Those are questions about power and about influence, not about who knows the most about the issue. This is about building power, building solidarity so that we have more people, so that we have more power. And I think that Michigan is at the epicenter for that dynamic. When you have these forces converging in Michigan, you have a state where political power is so concentrated in the hands of people who can dole out a lot of money. And in Michigan, that is corporations a lot of the times who've been given tax cuts to locate in communities that are already overburdened.
There's some influence and power still in coal. When Trump was running for president, what did he say? He was gonna save the coal industry.
For decades, resident activists and community groups in Metro Detroit have been fighting for the right to clean air, water, soil, and land. The fight has included work to enforce existing environmental protections, increase monitoring, and develop new policies and create new economies that could support the wealth and health of residents.
Even though there's study after study, health studies for decades have shown a link between diesel emissions and health diseases, this community had to take on its own studies to show that in fact the community suffers already from the traffic.
We are just lay people. We are not toxicologists, we're not biologists, we're not scientists, and we were able to discern from air samples that we conducted through using a 5-gallon drum, a vacuum cleaner, and plastic bags, sucking up the air. We sent them out to a lab in California, and when those results came back, it showed pollution here in this area off the chart.
Many grassroots neighborhood, community, and statewide campaigns have been launched to confront these issues in the fight for environmental justice. For instance, the Southwest Detroit Community Benefits Coalition, formed in 2008, a community-elected board mobilizing to address the threats to community well-being with the pending international border crossing between the U.S. and Canada, which is currently under construction.
Welcome to the Gordie Howe International Bridge, the new gateway between Canada and the United States.
This bridge is landing in an area where we actually have the highest number of children, the highest concentration of children, and children under 5 in the entire city of Detroit. It's a very densely populated area. There are the least number of vacant homes than there are across the city, and it's a really vibrant life that people have here. Many of the people they work in the community too where they live, and it's a predominantly, on one side of the freeway, predominantly Latino community, so people struggle with language barriers, and it's really important that we understand and we communicate with the families about these potential health impacts that are coming in the future, and we know how much families care primarily about their health. This project is landing right next to the I-75 freeway. Roadways that have over 10,000 vehicles on them a day have high roadway emissions. We did truck counts in the neighborhoods on streets, and we also did a door-to-door health survey, and the health study showed that residents living within 500 feet are more likely to die prematurely and more likely to have multiple health diseases. The impacts are well known, and yet the community had to take on its own study. And that's just an example of where the laws just aren't protective enough for communities like this.
At the state level, the Michigan Environmental Justice Coalition is mobilizing across communities with campaigns for climate and energy justice. Some devastating events have mainstreamed the concept of environmental racism and environmental justice. For instance, most people have heard about the Flint water crisis, but many people don't know that these injustices are playing out daily across our nation, and many don't know what they can do to address these issues.
The children, the adults, the seniors, they need somebody to fight for them. They need somebody to let them hear their voice, because our voice, it hasn't been here for a long time ago. We were like a lost city in the area.
I became involved in what we call the toxic tours after Rhonda Anderson had asked the community, what did we know about pollution? What did we know about the very industries that we worked at, our family worked at? Had we ever really went to them to see just how they operate and what happens around them?
The tour is important because it shows you up front to your face, no ifs, ands, or buts about it, how these industries are having a detrimental impact on the surrounding communities.
As society must confront the impacts of climate change that are well underway, we'll all be affected, and EJ issues will further magnify. We all must pay attention, hold elected officials and corporations accountable, and work towards policy solutions that prioritize those most impacted.
We'll continue to do what we've been doing for the past couple of decades, and that is fight so that we can change the system.
I really want people to imagine what the Detroit River and the River Rouge tributary looked like before colonization, before the clear cutting of our forests. Imagine what it looked like before fish kills, before PFAS and nuclear waste littered our shorelines. Imagine putting your fishing rod in a river and pulling out fish that was safe to eat. Imagine walking down the streets and feeling safe. That's the kind of future that we can recreate here, right, in Detroit and all over Michigan, really. But we need the political will of our decision makers to help us build an economy that regenerates Earth rather than exploits it.
Pollution has no boundaries. What impacts me impacts you, and impacts us all.
Take one, interview Beth Del Rey.